Thank you all for attending this year's Leadership 100 Business Forum. We are honored to have our longtime member, James Orphanides, with us today. Jim was educated at Heidelberg College and Queens College, receiving his bachelor's and master's degrees respectively before embarking on a successful business career. He started with Chicago Title Insurance Company, and then he was with Commonwealth Land Title Insurance, Preferred Land Title Services, before serving as president, CEO, and chairman of the board, and eventually chairman emeritus of First American Title Insurance Company. And he is currently the chairman and CEO of USRealty.com. Hand in hand with his business success, Jim and his lovely wife, Nora, have been actively involved with many not-for-profit organizations, and Jim sits on the boards of the Foundation for Medical Evaluation and Early Detection, Citizen Budget Commission, and the CUNY TV Foundation. We are glad to have him with us, and it is my distinct pleasure to introduce a fellow Queens boy, Jim Orphanides.
Well, I didn't want to digress too far, but I wanted to just tell everybody today we're going to have a conversation, not really a speech. And the conversation is going to be, is what's happening to the American dream? We've heard a little bit about it yesterday when we heard about the Menaki Museum, and we understood simple facts. But right now, because we're all finished with our lunch, I want to start out with one concept that I want you to just take as a gospel axiom. There's a reason for everything. That's not to be discussed. I'm not going to answer questions on what that means. Just there's a reason for everything. And we'll get to that in a moment. But I'd like you first to stand up, if you would, and I want us to do something because it's part of the American dream. I want us to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I brought in the flag for that reason. If everybody can in unison, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, one republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There's something I want to now read to you. A different pledge. You all sit down again. I pledge allegiance to my flag and the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Everybody, you all see what's missing? You heard what was missing. Under God, right? And not my flag, but to the flag of the United States of America. Because we want to make sure that we all know. For 125 years, I'm sure everybody in this room can say they are coming back as far back as 125 years. Somebody is rooted with the old country, our heritage. But we're here in this country. And the key concept of what that I just read is the Pledge of Allegiance was the original Pledge of Allegiance that was created back in 1894. Now, today in schools in the United States of America, they are now not forcing people to recite the very Pledge of Allegiance we all knew by heart. Something's wrong right there. We are now not even caring to go back and let's take out the under God, but we're not going to even recite the Pledge of Allegiance. That's just one concept. Where is the American dream? What's going on? What's happening? Why are we letting this happen? Those are going to be some of our questions. We're going to solve some of America's problems here in this room, and you're going to be happy with your solutions. But it's going to mean that it's going to have to be, again, things that we all know very well. We have to make sacrifices in order for it to be a better place. So let's go and let's start the story. So I told you just now about the under God. Do we know why it was put in the Pledge of Allegiance? Does anybody want to take a stab at what happened and when that happened? Nobody? Okay, I'll give you the answer. 1954, we put the words under God in the Pledge of Allegiance, and we changed it to the way we recited it. The reason why we did that is a very clear reason. 1950s, we had just finished the McCarthyism era. There was a fervent congressional group that were very pious and very concerned about communism in the world. And we were at war with communism for post-World War II. We're not worried about the Chinese communists. That's a whole different story. We'll get about that in the business section. But back to the point. So the country changed and realized that we didn't want to identify or allow our people to identify with the communist world, which were atheists. I heard this morning stated that the Russian Orthodox Church, how does a Russian Orthodox Church that wasn't allowed to exist for 85 years come back to life overnight? So, there's all these little, sidebars. But back to the point. So America has been under God for almost 70 years. Think about that, 65 years. There's another thing that we should know. On your currency, you notice the words, "In God we trust." There is a group today in Washington that want to get rid of that. They want to get rid of "In God we trust." Now, this is a forum where we have brought church and community together and a sense of belonging. We're all part of one big family. The American dream is what we are absolutely the fulfillment of. Everybody in this room is a member of that experience. What happened was our ancestors had a dream. They came to this country usually with nothing. Then their children were living that dream. We are the benefactors of all of that dream, and that depends on what part of the timetable you come into this country. But back to the issue of America and today, and "In God we trust," and under God. So that's part of where we go. So now, let's just talk about, and bear with me for a moment. What do we want to say? Okay, what was the purpose behind the American dream? Well, what does it mean, and what is it all about? Well, I guess the American dream is kind of talking about people who wanted to get something that they didn't have before. You wanted to own your own home. When we were younger, we used to go to things like parties on a Friday night in Corona, Queens, where we were first married, and people would have mortgage-burning parties. Everybody ever remember that? Does anybody know about mortgage-burning parties? That was when somebody claimed that they actually owned their own home outright without owing any money to anybody. That was a pride that came with that. That was what meant the sense of they were a member of this community, they were Americans, and they loved their country. So let's now talk about what really has happened in America. When I was a kid going to school, I was not too good of a student. And as a student, I was really always at the bottom of the class. And we had so many kids in the baby boomer era that when I went into a class, instead of it being 2A, 2B, 2C, we had like 2 Fs. I always found myself in the 2F class or the 3F class or the 4F class, etc. So I was a terrible student. And I kind of didn't know why, but because I had 2 brothers and they were both very good students. So I have here a report card that I'm going to give us, and I call it the American Report Card. And I'm going to read from this in a moment to explain the American dream and what's happening to it. But I will tell you, there was a report card that I know that was far worse than that one, and that was my own. So I'm looking at this, that we're not doing so bad, but we're not doing so well either. So let me start out with the first part of the American Report Card. Student loans. Everybody's heard the problem. Student loans today are equaling up to $900 billion. $900 billion our young people owe to the government, effectively, or to the banks. The default rate on those $900 billion is over 50%. Right now, our young people are not able to pay for their school and education, which we've all encouraged them, part of the American dream. What was it all about? It's always been about education, home ownership, about education, basics, the things that we take pride in, the things that are important. These are the values that we all share. So here it is, first thing on the report card. I'm not going to call it mathematics, I'm not going to call it English, I'm just going to call it the American Report Card. Student loans, $900 billion, over 50% default rate. Here's something that's going to hurt everybody in this room because we just had a lovely lunch. And I know we're all Greek, so we like our food. So the issue here is food stamps. What are food stamps? This is the government trying to help people who don't have the resources to be able to put the proper food that they need for their families on the table. Well, today there are 47 million Americans who are getting what is no longer stamps because of the degrading aspect that food stamps represented. They now get debit cards. 47 million Americans go into grocery stores with a debit card that's given to them by the government. What is that annually? $75 billion for just the food stamp program alone. That doesn't count any of the other subsidies. Next one. We all know this one because many people in here are very oriented to the business world. The federal debt. Today, it sits at $18.5 trillion. Now, we're told that we don't have to worry too much about the federal debt. Why would we be told that? Because they decided to use as a mark against the debt that we can really take care of it because our GDP, which is about $18 trillion, is neck and neck with the debt. If we go way below it, we might get a little more nervous. I'm sorry, I don't think anybody can be not uneasy about the fact that we owe $18.5 trillion. So let me tell you the stat on that one. It would take $59,000 for every American citizen, that includes newborn babies, to pay off the national debt. How many Americans do we claim that we have for 1915? 323 million people. Just think about that. How many people have $59,000 in their bank account at the age of 6 hours, or the age of 6 months, or the age of 6 years? And that's what it would take for all of them to pay off that debt. I just told you about the student loans. That's added to this debt. That's not included in this debt. That's an additional one. So we've asked our young people to take on this burden and the burden that they've taken on themselves. Let me go on with the report card. Money printing. We all know, we've seen currencies. We just saw it in Argentina, and we've seen it in Venezuela, we've seen it in Brazil, and we understand what happens when governments and peoples print money. It happened in Greece long ago. And when you print money and you don't have the business to back it up, you're going to call and create something that is basically a devaluation. There's nothing behind that money. Right now, the United States of America, in the last 10 years, has gone from printing $400 billion a year to $3.5 trillion a year just last year of new money. Now, when you take that and put that next to that debt, that's another, what we call, I would say in this case, it's like a head fake. If you catch me moving, you'll understand. I just moved a second. So that's part of the structural points as well. The American dream being poured upon us, and our report card is showing us that we're not doing so well on our grades. Next one, health insurance costs. Everybody knows about that one. That's been the hot topic forever. Obamacare. Now, what is it about Obamacare that everybody can't stand? We all know we have aging parents, we have people that we know that are sick and need care, and we know that a lot of people can't afford to pay for it on their own. It costs a lot of money to go to a doctor. It costs a lot of money, God forbid, if anybody has to be in a hospital. And certainly those people fighting those real diseases can be costing families their entire savings and putting them in debt in a different way. Healthcare subsidizes part of that. I'm in that zone where I can't even provide for myself independent health care. I had to take Medicare. I was forced to take Medicare. And I couldn't understand why I couldn't opt out, but I couldn't opt out. So I have that plus the secondary one. But today, America is paying, and this is now something that is untalked about, since 2010, the annual increase to the American individual who pays for health care for himself and his family or herself and her family has gone up by 25% every year. Health care. Now, who's making all this money? Where is it all going? Why is it we have so much debt? Why do we have so many problems in this country that we don't seem to be able to solve? Now we're going to say, should we turn to Washington? Well, we all are in the midst of an election. The longest running election, I think, in mankind has been foisted on us for the last year and a half, and we still have another, 9 months more of agony that we have to subject ourselves to. But putting that aside, let's go on to the next part of the report card. Labor force participation. What does that really mean? That's what we commonly call the unemployment rate. So here it is. Labor force, back in 2008, at the start of the recession, there were 86 million Americans working in this country who had real jobs. Today, there are 82 million Americans who have real jobs. Now that includes, that $6 million loss doesn't mean we've stopped producing people, we've stopped growing up. Those kids 8 years ago have grown up and now they've gone to college, some of them have gone through school. So there's a whole bunch of people coming through the system. And most of the people that are on the other side of the fence, like myself, they're not necessarily retiring, and they're certainly not going away very quickly because we're living a lot longer. So now you have a labor force that has gone down and the real jobs that are just not there at this moment to be generated. What happened to American industry and what happened is something that we call the Great Recession. We heard about the Great Recession, and we'll get to that in a minute. We also know that there was a Great Depression. I wasn't there, but my parents sure told me the story about it. Next one on the list in the report card. We're almost done. Workers' share of economy. Well, this one is a pretty abysmal structural statement. So workers started back in 2000, going back to the recession, I won't go back to 2010. Going back to 2008, we have slipped by 40% in terms of their involvement and their share of the economy, which means that the working class American families today are earning less. Today, 8 years later, from 2008. That's another indication. So again, let's draw the picture. Food subsidies, student loans, federal debt, printing money, health insurance costs going up, labor force going down, workers' share of the take going down, median family income. This is the one that just hurts terribly. No one would be here in this room if they were living this life. $54,000 at the beginning of the recession, $51,000. Again, going in the wrong direction. It's almost as bad as my report card. Not quite, but it's getting there. Home ownership. This is one that does hurt because I come from that industry. Or at least I was in that industry, and I still am with U.S. Realty. 68 million American families owned homes in America in 2008. Today, with all of the efforts to try to get things done, refinancings, etc., 64 million now own. 4 million people dropped out of no longer live in their homes. And they are not dead, they didn't disappear, they just 4 million less homes. So America, which used to build things all over and build different cities and towns, there are people in this country that are living in parts, this is one of them, Phoenix. This place has grown out of nothing into one of the major cities in the United States. Unfortunately, who's owning these properties? It's not the American family anymore. The 4 million have dropped away from the system. So that's the current American report card. I'm not sure. Now, again, I was not a good student. I was never a good student. And I finally picked myself out of the rubble heap when I was out of college. Maybe, at best, a D minus. D minus. Most people would just say, give him a straight F. So that's the picture I want you to have in the background. All right, so now let's go and talk about, for a moment, the Depression versus the Recession. And I will talk a little bit about, just for a second, about a book I recently read by a guy named Adam Cohn, and it was a book entitled Nothing to Fear. Everybody remembers the FDR speech when he first went into office in '32. He said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. That was the quote. What he did when he went into office, and I'm using this as a comparison to our recession, is anybody in this room think that the recession of 2008 is officially over? Anybody, please raise your hand if you do. Okay, I have one that does believe so. I hope you're right. I guess the consensus is a lot of people in this room don't feel what you feel, but let us all be wrong, and I hope you're right. But at this moment in time, the Great Depression, which we all come from that period of time. Some of the people in this room actually lived during that depression. But the recession that we have had with this report card, where if I gave you the report card of the depression, you wouldn't find too many differences here, except for one major one. Unemployment was even greater. Greater. But what's the difference? We now have a government, and this is the subject of where the American dream is losing its luster. And what's happening to it is something that we should all be worried about. We came and we understood, we wanted to work hard, we assimilated. Greeks all over the world, wherever they go, they adopt their country wherever they're living and make it their own. And they make us all proud. They don't cause trouble, they work hard, and they become part of it, and they become patriots of that country. The same in this room. There isn't anybody in this room that doesn't have the gratitude and appreciation and know that this is a nation where we are all patriots. We love this country. But does the country love us? And that's a question now that we do have to ask. The recession that started in 2008, if we use that as the year, is something that I would use in terms of a medical term for a moment. The depression was we were sick with a flu or a chronic bronchitis that lasted 12 years. World War II was the answer that basically ended the recession, which means that we all had to go to a cataclysmic war to end it all, that we would build and we would sacrifice and we would make those commitments to pick ourselves out of the rubble heap. But when FDR went into Washington, the first thing he did, his first 100 days, he had a plan. And here's something I can tell about. I would tell anybody, whatever you do, and whatever you're thinking, and whatever you want to try and consider for the future, have a plan. If you don't have a plan, I can tell you, your plan is to have no plan, which means you have a plan to fail. Any plan is worse than no plan at all. It's a simple truism. I gave you that axiom. There's a reason for everything. Stick with that, and we'll get back to that in a minute. But back to the difference between the depression, which was that chronic bronchitis, and this recession. Maybe we think it's been a bad cold, just something we just can't seem to shake. But let's talk about what's the legislation that we've seen? What were the initiatives that have happened in these last 8 years? Now I use an example. If I wanted to take kids on a trip and say, we'll go on the school bus, and the school bus driver showed up drunk, would you give that person the keys to that bus and say, here, take the kids on the trip? There isn't anybody who would do that. So now, when you think about it, the people we have representing us, we put these people there to take care of us and to make sure that they did the job that we wanted them to do, whatever that was we thought we wanted them to do. But these are the same people that today, if you use that example I just gave you, would you give them the responsibility now, after 8 years, to still say, let us keep trying, we'll fix it sooner or later? How much longer will we allow America to be at risk? And that's something that is important to us. And it's not just risk economically. It's not just risk socially. It's not just risk in terms of income and value and monetary wealth. It's a different kind of risk. This is a world risk. Today we have something that we never had before, technology. And technology is a different, it's always been around in the Industrial Revolution, but not to the way it has become now. But let's go back for a moment and just go and say, what happened, and how do we get things done, and how do we get things started? So in the first 100 days of that depression, FDR started a whole bunch of different programs, prioritized what was in the schedule. Instead of having the schedule that he was trying to deal with, he prioritized that schedule and made it clear. Commonly known as, he made the statement that said to America, which is what we need to know now, you can still have anything you want, but we can't have everything we want. And that means that we have to decide what we really need and what we really want. So what we want is what we really need, not needing what we want. It's kind of a play, but you have to just consider it. That's part of the economic turmoil. We have America's report card right here. This is not necessarily us in the room, but we know people that are victims of this. You don't have to go past one door, past your neighborhood, or one person in your family. You'll find the answer of some of that report card right here. Those grades have been pretty bad. Again, mine were pretty bad too. So let's talk about now a couple things that we have to look about. What is the most important feature of the U.S. economy today is that it's based on something that we do well. And I know certainly because I live in a house that does it really well. We consume. We love to buy stuff. That's what the American public is doing all the time, and they've done their job. The people have done their job. Now it's time for government to do its job. That's really what I'm here to tell you. We have been doing our job. During this recession, we have been consuming 80% of our economy, and there are plenty of people here that are economists and people who know their business. 80% of the economy is based on this consumption, buying stuff. Even stuff we don't need, we still buy it anyway. So it's kind of an interesting play. And I certainly can tell, because my wife will remind me that I buy stuff and put stuff in drawers, and I take up every inch of counter space all the time with all kinds of stuff. But I say, I'm doing my job. And when she says she buys, she says, I'm doing my job. I'm helping the country. We're supporting America. We're doing what we're supposed to be doing, consuming. But here's another thing, a little factoid. We've now noticed oil prices going down. In this state, I think you can buy gasoline. I think I saw it. It's under almost like $1.50. I think it was just even a little lower than that. And on the other side of the border in California, it's something like $2. So that $1.50 has now put money in the hands of the working class Americans. When you think about the number, and I'll give you a number that's kind of close to what it is, it's now coming up to being $900 million a month for the American families in their pocket, cash disposable money. Excuse me, $900 million a week. A week. I apologize, I said month. So do that times 52. You don't have to be a genius at math. That's a stimulus in into itself. Now, those people that do that 80% buying, and we're consuming 80% of the time, why has it not really hit the economics of normal consumerism? Maybe there's a mistrust. Maybe there's a concern. Maybe there's a little bit of I'm not sure what's really going on in the country right now. I'm not happy with what's going on in the country right now. I'm not sure that they're going to be there for me. They haven't been there for me and my family now for the last 8 years. What makes me think they'll be there tomorrow? And by the way, we have the greatest show on earth right now is the political debates and the contest for who's going to run the White House. So let's start and just discuss for a moment, take a little bit of a break and say, what are some of the things that we need to talk about in order to help fix the problems in the country? Well, I would say one thing about, I hear what you're saying, but I'm gonna let you know about one thing that I fear greatly, and we'll get to that too, but I hear what you're saying.
Taxes are regressive.
We know no one will blame. That's right. Okay. That's okay. No, I appreciate the concept, and I didn't want it to be a political thing, so I'm trying to stay away from that because I'm really concerned about the American dream today and the vision that we want to give our kids and the hope that we want to give our kids, because those are things we were given. We were given those hopes, and we were given that opportunity. We were the beneficiaries of it. Now we should feel a little guilt. And since I'm a New Yorker, we do guilt very well. So it's kind of and I heard Pauline say that, I'm a humble guy. There's no New Yorker that's humble. Forget it. Just forget it. There's no if anybody in this room tells me they know a New Yorker that's humble, I want to know who that person is. I'd like to meet him myself. But putting that aside, and we'll get to that discussion in a few moments. But again, taxation, government, regulation. There was a bill passed by a Connecticut senator and a congressman, Dodd-Frank. They are still writing the legislation. Both of these guys are out of office. They are still writing the legislation and the regulations. Do we want more regulation? Now, the answer is, every time the government regulates, that means they're coming into your life in a different way. They're trying to make sure that they control the environment. It's like we're the laboratory rats and they're the lab assistants. They're playing with us. It's another head fake. All this taxation. Now, American business, let's now go to the heart of where I want us to take ourselves for a second. Each one of us is a company in and to yourself. You are an institution in and to yourself. And you now wake up in the morning, and if you wake up and you don't have any of the pains and sufferings, I'll go back and I'll give an example of something that is important, and it's part of what I tell people all the time, and I'll talk to the young people about it later. I look at the life that you have, and I know the Bible says that if you're lucky if you get 70. So think about it. When we were first born, we didn't have much to say about it. We lived with our families. Most of us did. And your first 25 years, you went to school. You did what you were supposed to do. You got a degree. You finished college. You maybe got married. You started working, got a job. That's the first 25 years. You didn't have any control of it. You had to do it. The next 25 years, you spent, and most of the people in this room are examples of it, you spent making your living, building your family, having your children, seeing them go to school, making sure they had all the things that you had, and help them along. Now you spent the first 50 years of your life doing that. I can talk about this because I've already gone way past that line. So now I look at it, if I got 10, and now that we're living a little longer and we have better nutrition and all those kind of things, we can say, let's stretch 70 to 75. So now I look at the last trimester. If I'm playing golf, I would say I'm well into the back nine for myself. So what am I going to do? How do I want to spend that last trimester of my life? Now, there are lots of people in here that have not reached that. You got plenty of time to worry about it. But those of us who have reached that, what are we going to do? What is left for us? What do we want? What do we need to do is even more important. So now I'm going to give an example of our business model at my company that I have a partner with, and it's a very simple model. Centurion Holdings, and I want to introduce that because it's part of what the dynamic of America is all about today. We basically put ourselves out as theoretically experts on businesses and helping businesses. Our model was to help businesses get to the next level. Simple idea and concept. And why did we say we could do that? Because we did them in our previous lives, in whatever businesses we were in. My partner was a Wall Street guy who comes out of the banking side, and he was the guy that ran UBS in the United States. And so he has his background, and I have mine. He was a Wall Street guy, I was a street guy with a real estate background. Point being, we decided that we needed to have a mandate by which we would operate going forward. People were knocking on our door, throwing stuff at us and saying, here, can we get out here? Can we help you? Can you help us here? And really, at the end of the day, they were all looking for something that is very common in all organizations. They were all looking for money. That's a simple agenda. They needed somebody to help them to get to the next level. And it wasn't just about giving them advice. It was about giving them finances to do it. And that's the problem in today's America. The lack of financial availability to the small business community, for which many people in this room represented success from small businesses. They weren't necessarily all working at IBM or Xerox or any of those other companies. Many of the people in this room are success by the good old formula: the harder you work, the luckier you got. It's that simple. So you're the inspiration for today in America. But back to that formula. So we would sit back and we would analyze people and we'd say, okay, now what are we going to do as a criteria? So my partner and I came up with a formula that said, one, we have to think that the business plan, the business model, the proof of concept, whatever it is, might be able to be useful and have a value to the American people predominantly because we're both patriots. And we wanted to make sure it might bring value in something good for mankind. That would be an important thing. That makes it worthwhile for us to consider doing it, since we're both semi-retired guys, even though my wife hates when I say the word semi-retired. Putting that aside, the second thing we wanted to do is to basically understand that we might be able to make money from it. We're capitalists. We want to make money. I'm not in business to lose money. I'm in business to make money. So is everybody else. We want to, if we can make a buck, let's make a buck. That was a good reason to do it. At least it justifies why we're doing it. But the third one became the most important one. We realized that there are a lot of people out there, and excuse my use of any kind of reference to language, but so when we looked at people, we judged them on that basis. Can we make money, but are they doing something that can bring value to the rest of our country or to the community? So every company in the Centurion portfolio is a company that has that aspect. When I used it in my resume, the only one I talk about is my usrealty.com. It is not a disruptor. It is basically to help American families that everybody here knows about that want to try and sell their home on their own but don't have the means to be able to get on the MLS. That's what my company does. It takes those American families who want to sell their home. We just saw how many families lost their homes in the last number of years. And they want to sell their homes without necessarily using the conventional brokers. Now, conventional brokers might say they hate us, but we are going to help them, but we're not going to sell the home for them. They still have to sell it on their own. We're going to enable them to get there. But what is the model there is kind of the play. Here's the fact. A home in America that's going to sell for $200,000, $220,000 is the average price of a home in America. Not necessarily some of the homes we live in, but the average price for the American family's home in this big country is $220,000, and that's a good number. That's the median number, $220,000. If that family that owns that home has a $150,000 mortgage, and let's keep the math real simple. Let's make it $200,000 with a $150,000 mortgage. That means they have $50,000 of potential equity. If they went to a conventional broker, they'd have to pay 6%. 6% of $200,000 is simple math, $12,000. Do the math. That's 6% to 200,000. But what is $12,000 of 50,000? That's what the American family is faced with today when they go to the conventional means. So we've all seen them. We all remember them. When I was a kid, we used to get in the car on the weekends and go out to Long Island, because I was a kid from Queens, and we'd get in our car, drive around, and we drove to where we could afford to possibly consider buying, and we'd see the signs occasionally, for sale by owner. That traffic was advertising in the newspaper, which nobody does today, and also possibly putting that sign on the lawn that said for sale by owner with their phone number, and call us and we'll make a deal. But to get that kind of market penetration today, you need to get out of the MLS. That is the single premise. We're trying to help the small American family try to sell their home at first, and if they don't sell it and they need help, we'll put them with a full-service broker. So we're not trying to put the full-service broker out. We're just trying to help the little guy not be taken advantage of any longer. That's a good thing to consider today in today's world. So somebody that may have to spend $12,000 of 50 is not talking 6%. Sometimes the number is even scarier. They have to go out of pocket to pay the closing fees and the brokerage fees for what little is left of the equity in today's American families scenario. So that's a kind of a structural issue. Again, the roots of the American dream, owning your own home. What happened and why would anybody want to do it now? So that's where we are as a group. Today, there's a lot of young people here. If I stopped and asked them, is that part of your dream or your vision to own your own home? Is it that important to you? Is that what drives you today so that you would have your own home? Conventional things like getting married and having a family. These are values that are being questioned by a lot of young people today under 30 years old, the millennial group. But let's go back and let's take a moment. And let me just see where I am. And then we'll get plenty of time for questions. Let's talk about business today. What's going on in American business? Now, I didn't have a report card for this one, but there are a lot of people in this room that know these stats better than I do. If you take the Wall Street Journal's typical business profile, they'll show you the top 1,000 companies in America. I don't know if anybody reads the Journal on a regular basis, but that's a good start right there. Just take a look at the names of those companies. Those are the top market cap companies in America, 1,000. Now, if you go and look, let's go back to 2007, 2008, before the recession started. You will see that those companies, the line that is one of the ways in which you make money is to grow your revenue line. Very important dynamic for any business person that would understand simple math. Grow your revenue. But what has happened during this recessionary cycle is a little different. We heard about it in the report card. A lot of people lost jobs. A lot of people dropped out. Companies have been managing to the expense side. So I know if I wanted to lose 25 pounds and do it by next week, I'd have to go to a surgeon and ask him to get rid of the fat that's on my body. And that would be chisel away, chop it off. But if I want to lose 25 pounds over the next 2 years, I might have the ability to do it on my own, and I'll do it slowly and surely and methodically. American business has methodically been chipping away at the foundation of why people work for these big companies, these 1,000 companies. And they've done it because that's the charge of management and CEOs. The companies, they are public-owned companies. They have people that run these companies that tell their boards, we're going to make sure we keep profitability, which is important because I'm sure everybody in this room knows what a casino looks like, correct? Does anybody not know what a casino looks like? Okay. Safe answer. Safe answer. Okay, now, but you want to know what is the greatest casino in the world? The New York Stock Exchange. No question about it. That is a casino in and to itself. It's a great place, and it's an exciting place. But those people that work in those big companies and those teams of management who report to their boards, who ultimately have shareholders like all of us and all those funds that we invest in, they're charged to get and do the very best to attain and retain profitability. Now, we don't get a chance to really go and ask them except when we vote our shares for the board, who then works with management. That's how it really works in America. We just basically are happy when we get our dividend and their stock price stays up or goes up. We get a little disappointed and angry and frustrated when we see the stock market, especially the first month and a half of this year, slip away on us. We got worried there. We had a little bit of a indigestion for a moment. But at the end of the day, those 1,000 companies are pretty sound companies because they're well managed. And I'm not taking anything away from the CEOs and the management teams. They're well managed. They have done such a good job. They have chiseled away at that body fat I referred to and done so. And where did they do it? They did it by cutting out what they considered unnecessary functionalities. So many people lost their jobs in corporations where they started, and they may have worked there for years. They weren't disloyal. They weren't bad employees. There's no person I've ever met that has ever woken up and said, I want to go to work and do a lousy job. Is there anybody in this room that has ever met an employee that ever said that to you, that I want to wake up tomorrow and go and do a lousy job? That's not the way it works. We all were told, work hard, do the best you can each and every time, and then you will get the benefits. The American dream, let's talk about it. Does the American worker feel that they're going to be benefited by doing their job and doing it well and being effective at that job, trying their best each and every time? I'm not sure they trust or believe that right now, because what's happened is we've taken that expense and cut it and chiseled it. So these companies are like the triathlons. They are so well managed now. They are so efficient. They are so adroit at how to manage to the expense side. But what has happened in these last 8 years is the real statistic that you don't see too many times talked about. Go and look at any one of those 1,000 companies. Take 10 of them. Create your own index and study how did they do on the revenue side of the coin. And you'll see that they have not grown by any substantive means over the last 7 or 8 years. This is corporate America. We're not talking government now. We're not talking about we're talking corporate America. So now, how do you get those people? And now let's talk about the American dream and how do we solve this problem? I'm not running for office, but how do we solve this problem in this world? Let's incentivize corporate America. They need to be given a reason. They've done their job. I'm not suggesting for a moment that I buy into the fact that some of the CEOs that I know are making the kind of money they're making, because I kind of made some of that money when I was a CEO running a company. So I can't really argue that. But I will say that I don't know too many CEOs that have really worked hard to be able to make the kind of money they're being rewarded for, but they are still part of the solution. But let's not make corporation and corporate America the problem. Corporate America is who we need now to find and get an agreement with corporate America to incentivize them to help bring back and stimulate the economy in a way where we can bring back a part of the American dream. We can't restore it completely, but we can start to stimulate it and start the discussion about getting back what we now see eroding. It's not that it's lost, it's just neglect. You know, I once had somebody talk to me about neglect. The worst form of abuse ever to be inflicted on anybody that's a human being of any kind, no matter who they are, is neglect. We have neglected the American working force in a way. We have now treated them poorly. We have not given them the will or the rationale to be able to keep trying hard and work hard because there's no place for them to go. Where are these young people going to get their jobs? I'll give everybody a site to go to at some point on your own. Go to Amazon.com warehouse. Click that button and watch the 3-minute video. You will see something that is not describable. But I'll give you a quick hint. There's 20 robots moving around on the warehouse floor of 1 million to 2 million square feet, and one person for 20 robots. So now, in the old days, there would have been 20, maybe 30 people. That's just a little bit of an example about technology. Last night we heard a concert, in whether it was this room or one of the other rooms, a beautiful concert in a hotel that was just magnificent. I think we all enjoyed it immensely. I have one of these stupid little phones. My grandson put an icon on here. Music 101, basically is what it is. I now can be an expert piano player by just pressing the button and play any music I want. If I wanted to learn the violin, I could press the button and become a violinist. If I wanted to be a flutist, I could press the button for the flute. So I know the story about music. I had a house that was a pretty good example of it. The reason why we went to New York City is because my mother left Ohio State University as a graduate, coming to New York to pursue her opera career. And she was a concert pianist as well. And when I was a kid growing up, and this is a good story to tell, my older brother was 5 years in front of me, even though he was only 3 years older. He skipped 2 grades. I was lucky to graduate from one class to the next. This guy skipped 2 grades, my older brother. He's an organic chemist and a biochemist. The other one's a medical doctor. So you can kind of figure out that my report card was the one that my parents paid attention to a lot. But we sat there at a Thanksgiving after he went to freshman year at Hobart College in Geneva, New York. And he sat there and he said, Mom, I'm really disappointed in you that you didn't really force us to take piano lessons. Now, my brother and I absolutely connived every which way we could to get out of playing and taking piano lessons so we could go out in the street and play on the 113th Street where we grew up. And I sat there for once and was quiet as a church mouse, put my head down because I was sitting next to my father, and my yaya was next to me, and here my mother basically without hesitating, she picked my brother and grabbed him by the neck and said, "You miserable punk, how dare you bitch to me about you not taking piano lessons?" Why? Because it was hard work. And we didn't necessarily want to be like our mom. But I knew at that point that kid brother of mine that's a medical doctor ended up, no matter what, he was taking an instrument, no matter what he said. That's how it worked. And that kid actually did pretty well. He should have been a violinist instead of a medical doctor. He probably would have been a happier guy. He said he was number 2 in all city orchestra as violin. So that's the difference between understanding what you have in front of you and the opportunities that we have and what we do with them. And again, I had the opportunity and I blew it. I just chose to be out in the street with the kids. I'm a street kid. And the kind of problems we have today need to be solved by not our politicians and our government. They're not going to be if we have to turn to government to solve every problem we have, we're in real trouble, folks. We're in big trouble. So I would turn around and say, think about it. What can you do in this room? So here's one of the ways. Let's incentivize corporate America. Give them a tax break. Give them a reason to bring back jobs and take some of these people off the unemployment list. Give them tax credit for every person they hire. Tell the top 1,000 corporations, hire 2,000 people. Hey, you know what? Do that math real quick. 1,000 times 2,000. Think about that. They have, by the way, those 1,000 corporations usually have countless thousands of people working for them. And they're pretty good companies. But if you give them that and say, we're not going to tax you on the federal level at all, you're taking those 2,000 people, and you must have them work for you for at least 2 years. You're putting them on the tax rolls. They're becoming taxpayers. They're getting themselves back on the grid. They're off the grid right now. That's just a simple one-stepper. All we have to do is a one-stepper. Now, if we can't get that done at the federal level, because it clearly didn't get messaged by the federal government at this point, then let's start talking about the states that have the power of taxation too. And let's have people incentivize business people. Give business people a reason to do something. And trust me, their ingenuity, their creativity, their dogma will allow them to be able to take you from point A to point B in a pretty quick way. They will get things going. So trust not the fact that corporate America is going to do always good things. They're still going to drive for profits. They're going to squeeze every ounce of blood they can from every employee. But that's part of what it was. In my company, when I used to run it and have over 600 people with me, I would basically tell everybody, here's the rule of order. Very simple, and it's important for all of us. I said the customer is always number 1. The company that you work for is number 2. You have to think about each other. That's number 3. And then don't worry about number 4. What was number 4, they said? I said yourself. If you do 1, 2, and 3 well, each and every time, you never have to worry about yourself. And not one of them ever said that they didn't understand that after a while. A woman came up to me 3 or 4 weeks ago at the real estate board dinner of New York. It's basically a black tie function for real estate barons and brokers. It's called Liar's Ball because everybody goes over and says, how'd you do last year? Oh, you did a great year. Best year I ever had. Everything's terrific. We built 4 new buildings. I own 10 new shopping centers. So it's called Liar's Ball because everybody says, hey, let's do lunch. Let's do breakfast. People that you wouldn't even want to have, you wouldn't want to meet on a dark alley. But anyway, back to this woman came over to me and she said, you don't remember me, but I used to work for you. And I said, and she says, I think of you all the time. I got a little nervous because she said she thinks of me every day and all the time. That gets me a little nervous because I didn't really know this woman and I certainly didn't remember her name. I said, well, help me out a little bit. What are you talking about? She said, I remember the rule of order. Customer, company, each other, self. And every day I think about that when I go to work. I said, wow, that's pretty good. So again, we're each other's customers. We can solve our problems by working with the very people that are all around us. And no matter how old you are, here's a couple things that I would like to say that we can all do. We talk about energy. We talk about the concern. Did everybody take a note with all the pricing compression in oil? You noticed that your airfares didn't go way down yet. You noticed that your electric bill didn't go way down. You noticed that your gas bill didn't go way down. You notice your phone bills are still going up, no matter what package you buy from whoever you're buying it. So go back and understand, hey, America's dream is being lost because we're just going along by the sheep. And if you want to be a sheep, that's fine. We'll be a sheep, and we can all say bah as long as we want. But everybody needs to now understand, be your own company, be your own corporation, be the leader of yourself. Take control of your destiny. Help the world. What's the most precious commodity in the world? Water. 2/3 of mankind does not have drinkable water to consume without having great difficulty getting it. 2/3. Now, somebody said the world population from the UN told me it's probably really more like 8.5 billion people. Do that math. That's a scary number. 5+ billion people don't have drinkable water. You go to a place like this, there's water on every table, etc. I would say if I was a conservationist, I'd go crazy right now. And what they're going to do is pour that water right into the sink. So let's help everybody. Let's help the world. Let's try and be a little bit of an understanding that we got to sacrifice. Here's how you sacrifice. Don't use that electric light that you're not using. Don't leave the lights on if you don't have to. If you're worried about your neighborhood and being robbed, I can understand maybe having a few lights on. But any energy you don't use is energy saved. That's conservation right there. Simple step. Don't let the water run. Don't flush the toilet every time you put a drop of something in there. Be smart about usage and understand water is I'm sitting here and understanding that California is still suffering with its great drought. I was just told that last night. I bet you don't, here's some things that, because of one of the businesses we're in, the food safety business, the chicken slaughterhouses, which are all over the country. They use 300 million gallons of water a year, each chicken slaughterhouse. They also kill over 175,000 chickens a day. Just a little sidebar, a little levity for a moment. One of the guys told me the story about how he went to one of these chicken slaughterhouses for a big corporation, I won't name that name, and he went in there and he saw this process, which is kind of disgusting if you're not used to that kind of activity from being a farm or being in that business. And he would see that the chickens were coming off and they would hang them by their feet so they would all be guillotined nice and evenly, and then let all the juices run out and all that kind of disgusting. But the chickens were all panicky. They were all panicked all the time. They couldn't settle them down. So what did they do to settle them down? They would pipe in Frank Sinatra, doobie-doobie-doo, etc. And that's how they got the chickens to calm down. And it worked, and they all got level-headed, cut off. So, and then they went into the first vat, the first stage. But here's one that goes for it. A little bit of science, a little bit of ingenuity. That 300 million gallons of water that gets wasted can be now reduced by half if you recycle the water. Simple. That's a business that's attacking that plan. They're going to save money. They're going to save water. They're going to provide it. So turn the faucet off if you're not using it. If you had a leaky roof, if your house was in disrepair, you'd fix it, wouldn't you? The United States of America is just it needs a little bit of work. It needs a little repair. That's all that we're talking about. Business people have been solving problems. We've been building buildings. We've been building centers. The modern-day shopping center. The stores are closing. And here's I'll tell a great story because it's a great American story. In early December, I went to a dinner for Ronald McDonald House in New York. And the Greeks are the only community of its kind that has its own separate division in Ronald McDonald House. It's basically the Greek community. I don't know if they do it in Chicago where Ronald McDonald House was originated, but I know in New York it's a big thing. And the person who is the chairperson is Mrs. Lundgren. She is the wife of the chairman of Macy's. So I said to her, only in America could I tell you this story. In 1988, I presided over what was at that time the demise of Federated department stores, which is now what Macy's is today. And that was when a gentleman from Canada, Robert Campeau, was buying the company and then bought the company and merged it in. And here I am sitting there. And I'm not telling you that story because I was the guy that was officiating for our group and Merrill Lynch was sitting at the table. But the reason why I tell the story is my mother's side of the family, I just told you, Ohio State, she grew up on High Street. And if you know Ohio and Columbus, I met some people earlier from Columbus. Manuel, are you here somewhere? There you are. So you know where it is, the old department store Lazarus. That department store during the Depression, my mother's mother, who was my ayah that lived with us until she died. She was 104 when she finally died. She was a seamstress. She had a little dry cleaning store. And one day some finely dressed woman came in and said to my mother, who was standing behind the counter, "Does your mother repair fine ladies' garments?" And she said, of course, without missing a beat. My mother said, no problem. So she said, okay, we'll start you out very small and we'll see how you do. And basically, the largest customer my family had in Columbus, Ohio, while they were going to school in Ohio State University and stuff like that, was Lazarus Department Stores. Who was that woman? Mrs. Lazarus. Rapid forward 50 years later, Jim Orphanides, the son of this woman, is sitting at the table where the Lazarus Department Store is being broken up and shattered in a million pieces. Only in America can that happen. That happens every day in America. Those are American stories. Now, the best part of it was, when I told her that, I said I couldn't be happier with the fact that Macy's has taken it to another level. But at that dinner, I said to her, is your husband telling all of us that he is going to really close 40 Macy's? The numbers were there. The deck was stacked against them. They were losing same-store sales. They had to do their corporate responsible job to their shareholders and to their own people. You don't want to put the whole company at jeopardy. You don't want to have, just like the United States, we don't want the whole country to be in jeopardy. Let's fix the problems in America. We can do it. It's simple, but let's each do it as our own corporation. Be conservationists. Be people that are going to be emissaries. Try to do the right thing all the time. Last, and then I'm done, and we'll take a couple questions if we can. In America, there was always this distinction between the Democrats and the Republicans. Now we're going to talk a little bit about politics. I had a guy that worked for me who was basically new from the Dominican Republic. And I said, are you getting ready to vote? You just became a citizen. You need to vote now that you became a citizen. He said, yes, I'm going to vote. I said, well, who do you prefer? He says, I don't care. I'm just going to vote Democratic. I said, well, wait a minute. Why are you just automatically a Democrat? You worked hard to get here. You appreciate everything. You save your money. You do everything you want to. What makes you become a Democrat? He says, I look at the Democrats that I know they cover and watch the little guy's back. They're for the little guy. And I said, okay, that's fine. And then another person told me, well, he's not able to articulate it, but what he really says is the Democrats do the right thing all the time. It's a very Greek thing to do the right thing. I said, well, what's the difference between the Republicans? He said, well, the Republican side, they want to do things right. Democrats do the right thing, and the Republicans want to do the right thing. Do it right. They want to do things right. Now, what's the difference today? There is no difference. Putting that aside, we can solve the problems of America today, folks, and it's real easy to do it. And I thank you for your time. I thank you for listening, and thank you for having me here.